There was intelligence around an attack just such as this. In the past 24 hours, there was a lot of discussion about just this sort of event, and that's what we've seen transpire. And yes, like so many things we've seen in Afghanistan in recent weeks, Ros, it is entirely predictable. You're talking about a group here, Islamic State Khorasan, which has been active in the region now for several years. It formed in about 2014, 2015, and like so many of these militant groups, it traces its roots back to Pakistan, particularly that area of the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, the federally administered tribal areas. The initial leader of Islamic State Khorasan was a former leader of Pakistan's Taliban, Hafiz Saeed Khan. So even back then, there were connections between the Taliban and this group. As Islamic State started to be pushed out of its caliphate in Syria, it then switched a lot of its funding, a lot of its attention again to that area of Pakistan and Afghanistan. There are tensions, no doubt, between the Taliban and this group, Islamic State Khorasan, and believe that, in fact, there have been hundreds of clashes between them over the years. But there are also deep connections. And what we know about Afghanistan is it is a place where a power void, a power vacuum, brings more instability. It is a place that's been racked by civil war, by outright war with big states, and now back to a situation again with the Taliban in control, where we are again going to see precisely this type of attack into the future.
And overall, Stan, what do you make of the Taliban government's response to these blasts?
Well, isn't it interesting now, Ros, that we hear from Joe Biden this morning talking about the Taliban and the United States sharing interests. He says, look, the Taliban aren't the good guys, but in this case, he's working with them to try to secure the area, to try to mitigate against other attacks, because he says it is in the Taliban's interest. What an extraordinary place to end up after 20 years of conflict, where the US military went in there after the 9/11 attacks to topple the Taliban and to push Al-Qaeda out of the region. Where have we ended up? With the Taliban back in control, Al-Qaeda, which moved to Iraq, which morphed into Islamic State, which has now formed this other group in Islamic State Khorasan, carrying out attacks against US forces, against civilians trying to get out of the country, precisely at a time when we have this transfer of power with the US about to leave and the Taliban more and more in control. This, as I said, is going to be the script for the future. More instability. It's what the Islamists call the management of savagery, to create a place of chaos and govern over chaos.
As you said, Stan, we heard the US President Joe Biden earlier this morning, and he said, "We will hunt you down and make you pay," referring to ISIS-K, of course. This was the response 20 years ago to those Al-Qaeda attacks in the Twin Towers on 9/11. Is there a sense then that history is repeating, of the cycle going round once again?
It is the endless war, isn't it? From the moment that the US declared this war on terror, as George Bush described it, we were going to be locked into this situation of almost a whack-a-mole approach, isn't it? You hit a group here and they change tack, they move there. You take out leadership and other leaders step forward to fill that void. When we saw the killing of Osama bin Laden, there was a lot of discussion then that will this be the end of Al-Qaeda? Well, of course it wasn't. Al-Qaeda had already taken root in Iraq and in fact had become an even more extreme organisation, if I could put it that way, which also then morphed into Islamic State. It's interesting when you look at this group, Islamic State Khorasan, because the United States has already been targeting its leadership. Hafiz Saeed Khan was killed. Several leaders after that were killed by targeted strikes by the United States. So when Joe Biden says that we will hunt them down and kill them, well, yes, there will be targeted strikes against these groups and against the leadership. What we've also seen, a feature of these insurgent groups, is that they are able to recover from that. They are able to change tack. They are able to switch to different parts of the world. They are able to fill that leadership void. More leaders step forward. The groups themselves mutate. So yes, there is this ongoing war against terrorism, and of course the real concern is, to go to your point about history repeating, that this is where we were before the 9/11 attacks, with the Taliban in control, Al-Qaeda under Osama bin Laden operating, plotting attacks against the West.
And Stan, Australia has said it's now ended its evacuation flights out of Kabul. Do we know how many people are still on the ground there in Afghanistan who were waiting to be taken out of the country and eventually to Australia?
No, there are 4,000, I think, that Australia's been able to get out. The United States is saying that it's going to continue its evacuation plans to get more people out of there as well. Despite this attack at the airport, we are likely to see, again, Afghans trying to make their way to the airport to get out of the country with the fear of other attacks to come, because we know that August 31 deadline is fast approaching. The Taliban has said that is it. There will be no extension of that. Joe Biden has said there will be no extension of that. Yet the United States is going to continue to try to evacuate people before then. But for the people of Afghanistan, for those who don't get out, we can see exactly with this attack what their fate is going to be. A country that has been in an endless state of conflict now for more than 40 years, that has seen civil war, the invasion of the Soviet Red Army, then the rise of the Taliban, the invasion of the US and allied forces, now the return of the Taliban, and more instability, more terrorism from competing groups in the region.